Before the world linked his name with rockets, robotics, and record-breaking riches, there was a young man embarking on a cross-country road trip with a laptop perched in the passenger seat and a business plan that no one quite fully believed in. One wrong turn, one wrong bet, and the plan would have been just another forgotten dream among the thousands of other internet fantasies of the early days. It didn't. And the reason it didn't is more about power, risk, and control than any success story ever lets on. Jeff Bezos was born in 1964 to a teenage mother and raised in a low-income family that was nowhere near the boardroom of Wall Street. Summers were spent at his grandfather's ranch in Texas, repairing windmills and laying pipes in the hot sun. That environment fostered something important: self-reliance and curiosity about technology. While other children were playing outside, Bezos created alarm systems to keep his siblings out of his bedroom and read science fiction novels about vast interplanetary civilizations. Long before Amazon, Bezos thought about scale. Bezos entered the world of high finance after graduating from Princeton. He worked at the hedge fund D.E. Shaw in New York City. Towers of office buildings, trading floors, and computer monitors aglow, the future looked secure, prestigious, and predictable. Yet in 1994, Bezos discovered a statistic that changed everything. Internet usage was increasing by more than 2,000% annually. What most people saw as a curiosity, Bezos saw as a once-in-a-century transformation. The first major risk was not heroic, it was reckless. Bezos forsook a six-figure income on Wall Street, turned his back on security, and pitched his idea of selling books on the Internet. He called it a regret minimization, thinking about himself at 80 years old and making the choice that he would never regret having made. He and his wife, Mackenzie, drove to Seattle. In the garage of a rented house, they created desks out of cheap doors and built what would become Amazon. If it failed, Bezos would lose more than money. He would lose credibility, career momentum, and years of his life on an experiment that most people thought was ridiculous. There were bookstores already. Why would anyone buy a book from a website they couldn't see and touch? The secret to success wasn't a single insight. It was a system. Amazon leveraged three powers: selection, price, and convenience. Three forces that pushed each other forward. By offering more books than any brick-and-mortar store could possibly stock, Amazon became a hub. Lower prices attracted more customers. More customers attracted more publishers. The flywheel started turning. Then came a decision that seemed crazy at the time. Instead of making money, Amazon would use almost all of it to make more. Warehouses were built out, logistics were improved, and tech teams were expanded. Graphs of increasing revenue and minuscule profit margins would confound economists for years to come. Competitors focused on maximizing earnings per quarter. Bezos focused on dominating for decades, and it worked. But it wasn't always easy. In the dot-com crash, Amazon's stock lost more than 90% of its value. Newspaper headlines debated whether Amazon would survive. Behind closed doors, there were tensions from laying off employees and cutting costs. Critics dubbed it Amazon.bomb. There were cultural controversies as well. Stories of working conditions in warehouses and a culture of corporate pressure created a darker narrative to the one customers enjoyed. There were antitrust concerns as Amazon expanded into new spaces, competing with the very businesses that relied on its platform. These were not side notes in a story of success. They were systemic side effects of a company trying to move faster and scale larger than traditional business structures were ever designed to handle. Amazon was no longer simply a retailer. It was a logistics network, a hardware manufacturer, a media producer, and, most significantly, a cloud computing powerhouse. Amazon Web Services, a mere sideline of the company, had morphed into the infrastructure of the Internet. Startups, governments, and international corporations began leasing computing power from Amazon servers. The server farms stretching across the land, the blinking lights and endless rows, the silent buildings humming with the power of the Internet, this was the true profit driver. Each victory fueled the next. Money from AWS enabled the company to fund its experiments in AI, its fleet of delivery aircraft, and its forays into entertainment. Prime membership secured customer loyalty. Data improved efficiency. Scale provided leverage. Wealth and then influence followed. The effects of Amazon's rise extended beyond the checkout cart. Amazon's influence on consumer culture was profound. It raised the bar on delivery speed, lowered prices, and offered consumers endless selection. Small businesses gained access to the world, and many local retailers struggled to compete with the downward pressure on prices. Supply chains reordered themselves in relation to Amazon's infrastructure. However, Bezos also invested in space exploration through Blue Origin, with the aim of eventually moving heavy industry off the planet. What began as an online bookstore now had ambitions that reached orbit. There are lessons here, and they are not dependent on size. First, invest in infrastructure change, not trends. The internet was not a trend, it was infrastructure. Second, create systems that compound. The flywheel effect turns small advantages into insurmountable momentum. Third, focus on positioning over market applause. Markets questioned Amazon for years before it became the leader. Fourth, use money to create leverage, not a lifestyle. AWS provided the fuel for future growth. Fifth, recognize that size amplifies all qualities, both good and bad. And finally, make a decision that will still be defensible in decades to come, not just next year. Today, Bezos is no longer the CEO of Amazon, but the systems he created are still in motion at planetary scale. The company's reach now is in commerce, media, infrastructure, and even space exploration. The question is no longer how the empire was constructed. The question is whether a system of endless expansion can function in a world that is growing increasingly skeptical of power concentrated in the hands of a few. Because history has shown that one challenge is the construction of an empire, the other is maintaining it.